My husband filed for divorce at Christmas dinner. I remember the clink of silverware, the December lights blinking red and gold, the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles, and then the sound of a legal envelope hitting the table. A sound so small, yet it cracked my world open like thin ice under heavy boots. His mother laughed first. Not a nervous laugh. No, a loud, triumphant laugh, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Finally, she said, sipping her wine. By February, she'll be homeless. My father-in-law smoked. My sister-in-law pulled out her phone like she might record my breakdown. Even the cousins who once hugged me every Thanksgiving looked away. My husband, Daniel, didn't even make eye contact. He just slid the papers across the table, the gold wedding band on his hand glinting under the chandelier I had bought with my savings. He cleared his throat like he was reading a weather report, not ending a marriage. "Merry Christmas, Allison," he said. "Sign them." That line still echoes in me. Sign them. Like I was trash he'd finally worked up the courage to take out. I didn't cry, and I think that scared them more than if I had. I sat still, breathing slow, watching the faces around the table, faces that had once smiled at me, accepted my gifts, eaten meals I cooked, now lit up with satisfaction, waiting for me to break. They wanted a scene. They wanted drama. They wanted me small. But my aunt once told me something. Power is quiet, Allie. Noise is insecurity. So I stayed quiet. Instead, I reached into my purse, past my trembling hands, and pulled out the black card. A sleek, heavy thing. My late Aunt Eleanor had gifted it to me on my 18th birthday with nothing but a note. Use this only when life demands you remember who you are. I never understood it. Not until that moment. The waiter approached, maybe 22, polite smile, nervous in front of my husband's loud family. He expected me to hand over a regular card, maybe asked to split the bill. Instead, I placed the black card in his palm like a chess move no one saw coming. His expression changed instantly. He looked down at the embossed silver lettering. The name he read was not Allison Brooks. It was Eleanor Sterling, my aunt, a name that meant more than any of them realized. He blinked, stepped closer, and whispered 5 words in my ear. 5 words that stopped Fox midair. 5 words that drained the color from Daniel's mother's face. 5 words that turned a Christmas ambush into a silence thick enough to choke on. I won't tell you those words yet. Not now. Because to understand why they mattered, why that moment flipped my entire reality, you need to know what came before. Before the divorce papers. Before the applause. Before the black card. You need to know who I was when I married Daniel. Naive, hopeful, thinking love alone could build a future. You need to know the small cracks that formed long before the earthquake. Because the real story didn't start at dinner. It started years earlier. In little moments. Little betrayals. Little dismissals. The kind you forgive until suddenly you realize you've forgiven everything except yourself. But I'm glad you're here. Really, I am. When I decided to tell this story, I promised myself I'd be honest, brutally honest, even about the parts that make me look weak. Because maybe someone out there needs to hear what I learned the hard way. And trust me, those 5 whispered words were only the beginning. Before I talk about what the waiter said, I need to take you back. Because what happened at that Christmas table didn't appear out of nowhere. It was the final act of a story I didn't even realize I was in. But before I begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if stories like this stay with you, please like and subscribe. It really helps me continue sharing the truths I've carried for years. Okay, let's rewind. When I first met Daniel, I didn't see any of this coming. To me, he was just a tall guy in a wrinkled blue shirt, standing in line at a campus coffee shop, complaining under his breath that the espresso was a war crime. I laughed. He turned, smiled, and said, "Then marry me and save me from this place." We were 21. It felt like a joke. Maybe it should have stayed one. Back then, life was small and simple in the best way. We lived in a cramped off-campus apartment with peeling paint, a fridge that hummed too loud, and a sofa someone had abandoned on the curb. We made boxed mac and cheese, watched old sitcoms, and fell asleep on each other's shoulders. I worked 2 part-time jobs and took night classes. He studied business and talked about one day like it was guaranteed. He'd say things like, "When I make partner, you'll never have to work again." And I believed him, not because of the money, but because I thought we were a team. On Sundays, we'd drive out to the lake in his beat-up Honda, windows down, radio low. I remember one afternoon especially clearly. The sun was sinking, the water was glass, and he said, "I don't ever want to fight with you like my parents did." It sounded like a promise. I didn't know it was a warning. The first time I met his family, it was Thanksgiving at his parents' house in the suburbs. His mom, Patricia, opened the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Everything about the house felt curated. Matching decor, perfect plates, expensive wine, conversations that felt rehearsed. She hugged me, but her words were the first tiny crack. "So you're the girl Daniel is determined to rescue from the working class." Him. She said it with a laugh, like it was a joke. It didn't feel like one. Still, I tried. I offered to help in the kitchen. She refused. I complimented the house. She said, "You know, we worked hard for this. Nothing was just given to us." That line stuck with me because my late aunt had told me the same thing, but in a different tone, as encouragement, not a threat. At that time, my Aunt Eleanor was still alive. She lived 2 states away, in a quiet town with old brick streets and a house full of books and art. She never married, never had children, but she had me. And somehow, I always felt more seen in her small kitchen than I ever did in my in-laws' mansion. When I told her about Daniel, she smiled. When I told her about his mother, she frowned. "Pay attention when people tell you who they are," she said, especially when they try to say it as a joke. I brushed it off. I told myself, she's just protective. Patricia will warm up to me. That was my mistake. Still, the early years of marriage looked normal. We had our tiny starter apartment. I worked as an assistant at a local design firm. He started at a mid-sized financial company. Long days, longer nights. We texted lunch photos. We argued about dishes. We made up in the dark. I noticed, slowly, that we was turning into him. His wardrobe got more expensive. His nights got later. His friends' names changed from Jake and Matt to the partners, the guys, the firm. Every time I asked how his day went, he'd say, "You wouldn't get it. It's just business stuff." Those 3 words, "you wouldn't get it," carved a little distance between us. But the first real warning sign came the year my aunt died, because that was when I learned 2 things. 1, that grief can sharpen your vision. And 2, that my husband and his family were very, very interested in something my aunt left behind. Something I didn't even understand the value of yet. And no, it wasn't the black card. Not exactly. That part? We're not there yet. If you think the Christmas divorce was cruel, wait until you hear what happened right after my aunt's funeral. My aunt's funeral was quiet, just a handful of people who loved her for who she was, not what she owned. It was a cold morning, the kind where breath hangs in the air and everything feels slower. I wore a black coat she once gifted me, wool, heavy, warm, like her presence still rested on my shoulders. Daniel held my hand, but loosely, like he was there out of obligation, not loss, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. After the burial, the attorney invited me into a small office near the cemetery. A single window, a desk covered in papers, a plant someone kept forgetting to water. He spoke gently. My aunt had left me her entire estate. The house, the art, the investment portfolio I didn't even know she had. And then he placed a sleek black case on the table. Inside it, the card, the one I used on Christmas. But what I didn't know then was that the card wasn't just a luxury. It was access. It carried a private banking link to a trust fund my aunt built over decades, not loud wealth, but quiet, generational wealth. When the attorney mentioned the Sterling Trust, I saw something change in Daniel. His shoulders straightened, his eyes sharpened. A man who looked bored 10 minutes earlier was suddenly alert, like a dog catching scent of meat. On the drive home, he asked one too many questions. So, how big is the trust really? Do you think your aunt expected you to invest it? Maybe we could use it for a new house? Something classy, something my parents would be proud to visit. My parents, not us, not home, them. I brushed it off. Grief is loud, I told myself. People say strange things when money floats in the air. But the next week, his mother invited me to dinner, alone. She didn't even ask how I was doing. Instead, between sips of wine, she leaned forward and said, Eleanor was comfortable financially, wasn't she? Comfortable. That word, drawn out like molasses. I answered vaguely. She smiled like a poker player reading a winning hand. And that night, Daniel came home with flowers. Big, expensive ones. The kind that said I want something, not I love you. He cooked dinner, lit candles, played our wedding song. When I asked what the occasion was, he said, no reason. Just reminding you how lucky we are. But later, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him whispering on the phone in the hallway. I only caught fragments. She'll sign eventually. Once it's joint, we can move fast. My family deserves security too. My blood ran cold. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it involved me. And money. Still, I stayed silent. Because silence keeps the peace, until it kills it. Weeks passed. Daniel became sweeter, more generous, more attentive, but only when the topic of inheritance hovered nearby. Suddenly he wanted couple vacations, business dinners, new suits. I told him I wasn't comfortable touching the trust yet, and the warmth dropped from his voice like a curtain falling. He snapped, why hold on to money you don't understand? My family knows how to manage wealth. My family, not our future, not you and me. Small comments followed, tiny stings that didn't seem dangerous alone. You're not very business-minded. You don't need an account in your name. You should let people who know better handle things. Each sentence was a thread, individually harmless, together a noose. The turning point came the day I found a folder on his desk labeled Sterling Acquisition Plan. Inside, projections, property sales, a house blueprint, but no mention of me. Only his name, his parents, his sisters, as if I was nothing but the doorway through which they'd collect my aunt's legacy. That was the moment I felt it, a small flame of unease in my chest. Not rage, not heartbreak, just awareness. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and I was finally noticing it. But here's the thing, I didn't confront him. Not yet, because what happened next cracked the truth wide open. Not a fight, not paperwork, a phone call, one voicemail that changed everything, one I wasn't supposed to hear. And the voice on the other end wasn't his. I still remember the night it happened, the night I stopped making excuses for the man I thought I loved. Daniel had gone to a work dinner. That phrase had become routine, a key that unlocked late nights, cold leftovers, and a side of perfume that wasn't mine. I had stopped asking questions because his answers were always sharp, defensive, laced with guilt disguised as anger. He left his phone on the counter by accident. It buzzed once, then twice, then a voicemail alert. I don't know why I checked. Maybe instinct, maybe survival, maybe a small whisper that had been growing in me since the funeral saying, look closer. I opened the voicemail. A woman's voice, calm, confident, familiar in the way a storm cloud is familiar once you've seen the rain coming. Daniel, tell your wife it's time. If she signs over the trust access next month like we planned, we can finally move forward. Your mother thinks you're handling her too softly. Don't let her change her mind. My heart stopped. Every word was a blade. We planned. Your mother. Sign over the trust. I listened again. And again. Each replay stripped away another layer of denial. The flowers. The dinner. The softened voice. The patience. It hadn't been love returning. It had been strategy. And the woman, I recognized her voice now. His coworker. The one he mentioned often. Too often. My chest tightened. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was betrayal wrapped in betrayal. Personal, financial, emotional. A whole operation under my roof. He came home later that night smelling like cologne and wine. He kissed my forehead, but I didn't lean in. I stood stiff, frozen, watching him move around the kitchen like nothing in the world was wrong. He talked casually, joked, opened the fridge, and I realized how well he had been acting. How practiced. How confident I would never look behind the curtain. Later in bed, while he slept with his back turned to me, face relaxed like a man who believed he was in control, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My mind replayed every moment, every comment, every dismissal, every time Patricia smiled like she knew something I didn't. I thought of Aunt Eleanor. Her last Christmas gift to me had been a letter. In it was one sentence I never understood until that night. Do not let anyone shrink you to make room for themselves. I cried silently, not because I was weak, but because something inside me was waking up. A slow, heavy realization. I had been chosen for manipulation, not love. Over the next week, I paid attention. Really paid attention. Daniel became pushy about finances. Patricia invited us to discuss family planning. His sister hinted about how joint signatures are just a formality in marriage. Small details surfaced like bones under thawing snow. A hidden email folder on his laptop. A second phone bill I hadn't seen before. A printed copy of the trust document with sticky notes where my signature should go. Every discovery hurt, but each one sharpened me. Then came the day he asked me directly. We were having breakfast. The rain tapped the windows. The coffee smelled warm, normal, deceiving. He slid a folder toward me, a financial restructuring plan. Inside it was a page labeled Trust Transfer Agreement with my signature line highlighted in yellow. He smiled like we were discussing new curtains. Just sign, Ellie. It's for both of us. Comment bait line, it's just paperwork. My hand trembled, but I didn't sign. I told him I'd think about it. His jaw tightened. His eyes went cold, colder than I'd ever seen. That was the moment I realized love had left him long before I noticed. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I observed, because I understood now. If I reacted too early, I'd lose everything. But if I waited, if I planned, I could flip the whole game. And then, like fate pushing the story forward, I found the final piece. An email, printed and forgotten at the bottom of a drawer. Subject line, final divorce draft, to be filed after trust transfer. Not if. After. They were going to take everything, then throw me away. Just like his mother predicted. I sat on the floor with that paper in my hands, heart pounding, breath shaky, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Because now I knew. They weren't just cruel. They were careless, and I could use that. Next is where the real shift happens. The calm before the storm, the planning, the quiet power. After reading that email, final divorce draft, to be filed after trust transfer, something in me hardened. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. Pain has a strange way of sharpening the world. Suddenly everything was crisp. Every memory, every lie, every smile. I sat alone on the bedroom floor for a long time, the house quiet except for the tick of the hallway clock. My hands were cold. My tears had dried. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't scared of losing Daniel. I was scared of losing myself. I remember whispering to the dark room, I won't be their pawn. That night was the beginning of my transformation, from the passive wife who apologized too easily into a woman preparing for war without raising her voice. I started small, observing, listening, gathering. Aunt Eleanor used to say, power is best when they don't see it coming. So I smiled more, cooked dinner, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, pretended I didn't know about the trust plan, pretended I didn't hear the voicemail, pretended I didn't see the agreement, because I needed time and information. Over the next month, Daniel became confident, too confident. He believed I was softening. He believed he was winning. Every time he hinted about the trust, I nodded thoughtfully. Every time his mother accidentally mentioned investment plans, I played clueless. Every time his coworker's name showed up on his phone, I didn't flinch. Let them think I was naive. Let them think the leash was still on my neck. I began visiting the law office secretly, speaking to an estate attorney, a woman named Sandra with steel in her eyes and warmth in her voice. When I told her everything, she didn't gasp or pity me. She said one sentence that became my anchor. If they are planning to rob you, let's make sure the vault is empty before they get there. We devised a plan. Quiet, legal, lethal. I transferred the Sterling Trust to a protected personal fund, still mine, but inaccessible through marriage unless I willingly signed as primary. In addition, Sandra advised me to start documenting screenshots, emails, recordings, timestamps. I became an archivist of betrayal. Meanwhile, I pretended to prepare for the trust transfer. I asked Daniel innocent questions about joint accounts. He lit up like a child promised a toy. He didn't know I had already sealed the vault. But financial protection wasn't enough. I wanted something more, the truth revealed. Not hidden whispers, not quiet suffering, public clarity. So I waited. Until Christmas, the date in the divorce email draft. The day they expected me to sign away everything and walk out empty. I hosted dinner that year, just like I always had. I roasted turkey, decorated the house, set the table with our finest china. And when Daniel's family arrived, I greeted them with warmth so convincing even I almost believed it. Patricia kissed my cheek and glanced around like she already owned the place. She whispered, "Maybe next year we'll put the tree somewhere grander, after renovations." I smiled. I knew she was counting renovations on money she thought would soon be hers. The entire evening, I watched them drink wine and talk loudly about future vacations, new cars, family upgrades. They spoke as if I wasn't there, as if I was furniture, as if the trust was already theirs. But I didn't break. Strength isn't loud. Strength waits. When dessert was served and everyone relaxed, Daniel reached into his cheap pocket and slid the divorce papers across the table, pretending to be somber, but I saw victory in his eyes. His mother clapped. His father smirked. His sister raised her phone, ready for drama. They expected tears, begging, silence. But instead, I reached into my purse and slowly pulled out the black card. Comment bait line, remember who you are. The table fell silent. Because this wasn't desperation. It was a move. The moment I placed the black card in the waiter's hand, Daniel leaned back like he'd won, thinking luxury was tied to his future wealth. He didn't know what that card really meant. Not yet. The waiter glanced at the name. His face changed. He bent down and whispered 5 words into my ear. 5 words that flipped the room. 5 words I had waited a year to hear aloud. And next, I'll tell you exactly what he said. But what comes after the whisper is even better. The climax, where truth explodes and masks fall. The waiter leaned in close enough that only I could hear him, eyes wide, voice low, respectful yet surprised. "Welcome back, Ms. Sterling. Authorization." 5 words. "Welcome back, Ms. Sterling. Authorization." And suddenly everything shifted. Not Mrs. Brooks. Not Allison. Ms. Sterling. My aunt's last name. The name printed on the black legacy card. A name that meant access, power, money they thought they'd take. A chill ran through me, but not fear, recognition. At that moment, I wasn't the wife they pitied. I wasn't the girl they expected to destroy. I was the heir they underestimated. I smiled, small, calm, and nodded to the waiter. Yes, full authorization. He straightened instantly, professionalism snapping into place. "Should I bring the private dining bill summary to you personally?" Daniel's mother's fork paused midair. His father blinked, confused. Daniel stared at me like I'd started speaking Latin. His sister lowered her phone. There was no scandal to post. Just confusion, thick and growing. Patricia cleared her throat. "What did he call you?" I turned to her slowly. "Ms. Sterling." She tried to laugh it off, brittle, too high-pitched. "We all Sterlings now, dear. Once the paperwork is signed." I cut her off softly. "No, only I am." My voice wasn't loud, but it was final. Daniel frowned. "Ellie, what's going on?" There it was, his first real crack. I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it beside the untouched divorce papers. A matching binder with gold lettering, estate protection contract. While you were planning renovations with my aunt's money, I said gently, I moved the Sterling Trust to a protected personal account. My name only. Irrevocable. Daniel turned pale. What? You transferred it without me. You never had access, I replied. You were waiting for me to hand it to you. His mother's voice trembled for the first time. You had no right. No, I corrected, meeting her eyes. You had no right. It was never yours. The room tightened. Thick as fog. Daniel shoved the divorce papers closer. Just sign, Allison. Stop being dramatic. Comment bait line, just sign. It's simple. I slid the papers back toward him, but this time, signed already. He stayed. You could hear the clock ticking. Wine glasses sweating. You signed them. His voice cracked. For a second, I saw panic, real panic, flash in his eyes. Yes, I said. Last week. My lawyer filed them yesterday. Patricia gasped. His father stood halfway out of his chair. Daniel laughed once, hollow. Then what's this dinner for? You wanted a scene. A scene? I leaned back lightly. No, a moment of clarity. I opened the second page. My terms. Assets stayed mine. Trust remained mine. House, mine. He left with what he brought in, which was almost nothing. He scanned the document, voice shaking. This is insane. I won't accept this. You already did. I pointed to the signature, his, signed automatically during a routine financial update I'd suggested weeks earlier. He hadn't read it. He never thought he needed to. He underestimated me. All of them did. His sister whispered, horrified, You tricked him. No, I corrected again, calmly. He tricked himself. I simply stopped helping him do it. The waiter returned quietly, placing a leather bill folder beside me, discreet, personal. Not a shared check. He bowed slightly. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Your family's account remains active as always. Daniel flinched at family's account, because suddenly his wasn't. Patricia slammed her napkin down. You gold digging. Careful, I said softly, not rising to meet the venom. There are witnesses. Everyone was staring now, not at them. At me. At the woman they expected to collapse, standing tall. Daniel's voice cracked. So what now? You just throw this away. Us. I looked at him, not in anger, not in love, but in truth. There was no us left to throw away. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was Judgment Day. I stood, adjusting my coat, gathering nothing else, because everything I needed was already mine. And as I walked out of that house, past the stunned faces, past the marriage I outgrew, past the future they planned for themselves, I felt lighter than I had in years. But endings are never that clean. There were consequences, whispers, legal calls. And there was healing, harder than revenge, slower than anger. That part is coming. Because power is one thing, peace is another, and I had to earn both. The door closed behind me with a soft click, the kind of sound you barely hear, but feel. For years, I thought freedom would be loud. A slammed door, screaming, objects thrown. But real freedom? It's quiet, like exhaling after holding your breath too long. I remember stepping outside into the cold night air, the winter wind cutting my cheeks, but it didn't hurt. It woke me. Christmas lights flickered across the snow. Children laughed somewhere down the street, and for the first time in years, I felt like I existed outside someone else's story. I got into my car, hands trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline slowly fading. My phone buzzed endlessly. Daniel. Calls, voicemails, texts. Then his mother's number, then his father's. None of them said sorry. All of them said come back. I didn't. Instead, I drove to a small hotel my aunt once loved, the kind with old wooden furniture and a fireplace in the lobby. The receptionist recognized the Sterling card and gave me the same room my aunt used to stay in, top floor, corner, with a view of the frozen lake. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the snowflakes drifting past streetlights like little pieces of silence. I should have felt triumphant, maybe even victorious, but all I felt was tired. A bone-deep tiredness that comes after surviving something you didn't know was killing you. Comment bait line, winning still hurts. Over the next weeks, the divorce finalized quietly. Daniel tried to renegotiate. My lawyer answered every attempt with documents, evidence, screenshots, recordings, the archive I'd spent months building. He realized quickly there was no loophole, no trust, no house, no second chance. I won, but even victory comes with grief. I mourned the marriage, not because I wanted it back, but because I had spent years believing in a future with a man who never planned one with me. I cried, not for him, but for the version of me who loved blindly, trusted easily, hoped relentlessly. Healing is not glamorous. It's slow breakfasts alone. It's paperwork. It's nights when the bed feels too big. It's deleting old playlists. It's remembering laughter that no longer hurts to recall that I started therapy. I visited Aunt Eleanor's home, my home now, a house filled with books, paintings, half-written letters. It smelled like cedar and rosemary, like memories and possibility. I spent days sorting through her things, reading journal entries, touching her favorite scarf, discovering pieces of her life I never knew. One entry stayed with me. Teach her strength, not bitterness. Give her wealth, not dependence. Leave her love, not chains. I realized she hadn't left me money. She left me options. Freedom disguised as inheritance. I renovated the house slowly, preserving her art, her garden, her piano. I started visiting local community centers, helping young women with financial literacy, teaching them what I wish someone taught me earlier. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was reclaiming purpose. One morning weeks later, while grocery shopping, I saw Daniel in the parking lot. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but deflated. Life without control isn't kind to people addicted to it. He approached me slowly, like a man approaching a past he doesn't know how to talk to. "Ellie," he said, voice soft, "can we talk?" I considered it, not out of hope, but closure. We sat outside near a coffee stand. He apologized, but his apology was wrapped in excuses. He talked about stress, pressure, expectations. But never once did he say the words that mattered. "I loved you, right?" Because he didn't. I told him I wished him peace, not to be kind, but because letting go of hate is heavier than holding it. Then I got up, threw away my empty cup, and walked away. This time, I didn't look back. Days turned into seasons. My life got quieter, not empty, just spacious. I filled it with books, friends, fresh paint, long walks, new hobbies. The trust grew untouched, invested wisely, a safety net, not a trophy. One evening in spring, sitting on the porch with warm tea, I realized something. I no longer thought about Daniel when I woke up. I no longer needed to replay the betrayal to feel strong. The wound wasn't open anymore, just a scar with a story. And now I'm finally ready to share that story with the world. The climax was loud, but the healing, the resolution, that's where the real power lived. When I think back on it now, that Christmas dinner, that black card, that moment the waiter said, "Welcome back, Ms. Sterling." Authorization. It almost feels like a movie scene. Polished, dramatic, controlled. But living through it wasn't cinematic. It was messy, lonely, human. Healing didn't arrive like a trumpet blast. It arrived like morning sunlight through curtains, slow, warm, almost unnoticeable until suddenly the whole room was bright. Months passed, and little pieces of myself returned. The girl I used to be, hopeful, trusting, she didn't vanish. She just evolved. I learned to take myself to dinner, to buy flowers for my own table, to laugh loud in public without shrinking. I traveled alone, once to a city my aunt loved. I sat in the same old cafe she wrote her poems in, ordered her favorite pastry, felt her presence like a hand on my back saying, "You made it." When people hear my story, They assumed the satisfying moment was the exposure, the shock, the collapse of their plan. And yes, watching their expressions crumble was a chapter one won't pretend didn't taste like justice. But the real triumph wasn't that night. It was the mornings after, when I woke up without dread in my chest. It was realizing I no longer needed permission to exist in a life fully mine. It was forgiving myself for staying as long as I did, for missing the red flags, for loving someone who only loved what I could offer. That forgiveness was the hardest part, harder than divorce, harder than confrontation, harder than revenge. Because strength isn't walking away angry. Strength is walking away whole. And somewhere between snowy December and soft spring rain, I understood something clearly. You don't get stronger when life is kind. You get stronger when life tests the parts of you didn't know existed. There are people right now, maybe even someone listening to this story, who feel trapped the way I did, in a relationship built on hope instead of truth, on sacrifice instead of respect, on survival instead of love. So hear me. You are not weak for staying. You are powerful for finally leaving. You are not foolish for trusting. You are brave for learning. You do not need their approval to be valuable. You were valuable before they even met you. Comment bait line. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes life breaks you just enough to let the light in. Sometimes betrayal isn't the end. It's the beginning of knowing your worth. I look at my future now with calmness, not urgency. I don't rush love. I don't chase validation. I choose peace like a daily ritual, tea in the morning, journaling before bed, walks through my aunt's old garden blooming again under my care. The sterling trust sits where it belongs, preserved, not flaunted. A symbol not of wealth, but of a woman who loved me enough to prepare me for storms she knew I'd never see coming. I wish I could thank her one more time. Maybe this story is my thank you. To her, to myself, to anyone listening who needed a sign. So now, as I close this chapter and place it gently on the shelf of my life, I want to speak directly to you, the one who stayed with me to the end. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. And if you're carrying hurt, betrayal, or a love that feels like a cage rather than a home, let this be your reminder. You are allowed to choose yourself. Sometimes that's the bravest love of all. The final moral in one sentence: don't wait for someone to save you. You are fully capable of saving yourself.